Good afternoon, class. This is Elaine, your instructor. Before we start today, I want to at least let you know about last week. Evidently, there was a mix-up with the assignment, so there is no assignment for week 1. So everyone realizes just last week we had a discussion question and a quiz, okay? This week we're going to have a little bit of a different type presentation. We're going to have a special presentation for you, and we're going to talk about immigration and Thanksgiving. So we're going to deviate a little bit from the book, so there will be no reading this week, and there will not be an assignment. However, there is a Thanksgiving quiz for you guys to take, okay? All right, so bear with me. I know my voice is a little scratchy. I'm having severe allergy problems, the whole itchy eyes, a whole bit. But, all right, so since we are in Thanksgiving week, we want to remember it's, you know, what all Thanksgiving is about, what we feel thankful for in our lives. And so we're going to look a little bit at the history of Thanksgiving and how immigration comes into play with that. So, when we think about the Thanksgiving, they're known as the Pilgrims that came to America. I'm sure we could probably call them the first immigrants. We don't really consider the Vikings. I think they were just here for a short stay. But the Pilgrims actually came to immigrate to America and stay here. So we can call them the first immigrants, or we can also call them the Pilgrims. So they came over in America on their ship known as the Mayflower. Some people may think it was known as the Tall Ship, but it was really known as the Mayflower. Now, these Pilgrims came over and they landed at Plymouth, Massachusetts. So we always say they came and landed at Plymouth Rock. I think the year was in 1620 on the famous ship, the Mayflower. Now, what we want to know about a lot of these passengers that came over, a lot of them, you know, they were at sea for a long time. So there are a lot of people that were sick. A lot of people died. The Pilgrims died during this first winter. They really were not prepared for the elements once they got here to America. They didn't really have proper housing. They didn't have proper food supply. So they really had a rough time once they got here. I guess they weren't welcomed with open arms by the Indians right away because there wasn't sufficient housing for these new immigrants to America. So what we know about these Pilgrims is, believe it or not, at one time they were actually known as the Old Comers, but that word didn't really stick. No one really liked the word Old Comers, so they kind of were also known as the Pilgrims. Some people say they were kind of also known as the Puritans or the Separatists before they came over. We see that the governor, William Bradford, he actually was the governor of the Plymouth colony, and he didn't really like the name Old Comers, so he's the one that basically decided that they would be called the Pilgrims. And so they are known as the Pilgrim Fathers to a lot of people, but basically the name stuck. So these Pilgrims came over here, they started their own little colony, they built themselves some housing, and they survived the first winter. Now, after they survived this first winter, they kind of got to know some of these Indians that were here, and they decided that they would celebrate the harvest and celebrate the fact that they survived this first year in America, and so it was kind of known as the first Thanksgiving. Now, you will see here a little note that they did not have forks during the first Thanksgiving. They had a knife, they had a spoon, they even had a big napkin, but they had to eat. Basically, you know, they kind of ate with their hands. They probably didn't have the best eating manners, but we know today, I hope most people use forks today, but in the first Thanksgiving they did not. So, what we know about the first Thanksgiving was about 400 years ago. It was celebrated in 1621. So we have these fresh, off-the-boat immigrants. They're all happy about celebrating in their new homeland, and today we call this holiday Thanksgiving. We will be celebrating it tomorrow. It's now always celebrated the fourth Thursday of November. A lot of times people ask me, where did that first come from? How did we decide it was going to be the last Thursday of November? Originally, the states, governors of the states would decide what day we would celebrate Thanksgiving, and it'd be a different day for different states. Down in the South, a lot of the Southern governors really did not like this holiday. They thought it was a Yankee tradition, and they didn't really want to celebrate Thanksgiving. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that actually was the first one that issued a proclamation for Thanksgiving. It was not considered a national holiday, believe it or not. I don't think it was a national holiday until like 1941 under, maybe it was FDR. But today, everyone takes it for granted, our Thanksgiving holiday. Now, so we know we had this huge feast at the first Thanksgiving. What did the Pilgrims eat? There have been a lot of stories that they did have some wild turkeys. They had a lot of fish, mussels. They tried this new thing called maize from the Indians. They probably had some other root vegetables there. They may have had some duck there. We know that there were about 53 pilgrims with the Native Americans, so we had over 100 people at this first Thanksgiving. We also know that there were not many women. Believe it or not, there were only about 15 women that survived the first year. And you think about it, who did all the cooking? Was it the women? Were the men sitting around the campfire, playing games, making bets? I don't really know how it worked back then, but I imagine it was the women that kind of got stuck with the raw deal. But what we do know, there was no pumpkin pie. What the heck? How can we have Thanksgiving? No pumpkin pie, no apple pie, no pecan pie. There was no pie back then. There were no ovens to actually bake the pie, believe it or not. So, let's look a little bit further. Let's talk about these pilgrims, these illegal immigrants. I mean, really, they were our first illegal immigrants. We have to agree on that. What were they like? What were they doing over here? We know they were running around with these little hats and buckles on, but what else do we know about them? Well, we know they came over here and they were really unprepared for life in America. I don't think they came with any working papers. I don't think they had passports. You know, they came over here and basically they relied on government assistance because they didn't have the necessary skills to actually survive. So they were very dependent on the Indians. Massasoit, I think he was the chief of the Algonquin Indians. And so these Indians really taught them how to hunt and how to fish and kind of how to make shelter to provide for their families so they could have other generations. You know, they didn't want these undocumented kids to starve. I think they probably needed some help with health care. They probably turned to the Indians to learn what foods they could eat, what they couldn't eat, what herbs they could use for minor ailments and things like that. They were really unprepared for the life in the New World, which when we think about it, may not be that different than a lot of immigrants that even come today illegally. They come today, they don't have sufficient housing. They sometimes come, they don't have any money, they don't have papers, they don't really know how to survive in the United States, maybe like they do in their own home. So this is kind of something we've seen that's happened since the first pilgrims coming over here. So, excuse me, the other thing we know that we had is we had a huge language barrier. The pilgrims didn't speak the language. They didn't even try to bother to learn it. Otherwise, if you think about it, on our citizenship test, instead of requiring everyone to learn English, everyone might be using the Algonquian, I think it's Algonquian language, rather than English. But that's not the case. I think we're lucky if people know how to say how. I think that's how the Indians said hello, but now it's hi. So, you know, what can I say about that? We know today on our citizenship test, English has been adopted as the official language of America. I wonder how the Indians feel about that, considering the fact they were the natives here and that the Pilgrims seemed to kind of overran it with their own language, thinking everyone should adopt English. Now, for a few more notes, let's talk about Thanksgiving today. We know traditionally turkeys are the food of choice. We know that turkeys can be known as toms. There's a lot of myths out there about turkeys. Believe it or not, one of those myths is that if turkeys stare up in the sky during the rainstorm, they will drown. Well, I looked that up, and it's a myth. They will not drown. But one of the other things I want to talk about is, believe it or not, one of our big celebrations for Thanksgiving now is known as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It began in 1924. A lot of people think Macy's was the first department store that actually started the Thanksgiving Day Parade, but it was not, believe it or not. Gimbel's was the first department store that actually started Thanksgiving Day Parade. And actually, at the first Thanksgiving Day Parade, they had live animals from the Central Park Zoo. They did not have the balloons that we are so proud of today. But now, today, we have these huge balloons that work all year to get these balloons ready to go for the Thanksgiving Day Parade. I believe this year we're having a new edition of one of the Power Rangers is actually going to be in the parade for those of you that have kids that may like Power Rangers. But what was the first balloon in the Macy's Day Parade? Believe it or not, a lot of people think it's Mickey Mouse. Some people have told me they think it's Betty Boop. But it was actually Felix the Cat. Can you believe Felix the Cat was the first balloon in the Macy's Day Parade? Felix the Cat is actually older than Mickey Mouse. I don't think Mickey Mouse came into existence until like 1934. So that's kind of an interesting fact there. So anyway, now what is Thanksgiving about? Eating a lot of turkey, dressing, sweet potatoes, a whole bit, making sure we have our Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and then of course, what do? We probably go out there and we watch too much football. For you football fans, a lot of people consider it part of Thanksgiving Day tradition. Believe it or not, Princeton played Yale in New York City around 1876 for the first football game, but the actual first pro football game was 1934, the Detroit Lions versus the Chicago Bears. Who won that game? I believe it was the Detroit Lions. So we know the Lions always play on Thanksgiving. Down here in the South, we like to celebrate one of our Texas teams that plays on Thanksgiving days a lot, which is usually the Cowboys. Cowboys and Giants play a lot on Thanksgiving Day, but I think they played last Sunday night, so I don't think they're playing this Thanksgiving for you fans. So, Thanksgiving, turkey, Macy's Day Parade, football, and of course, let's not forget Black Friday. Black Friday is known as kicking off the Christmas season with all the big sales that everyone likes to rush out to the stores. Now, this Black Friday has gotten out of control the last few years. They kept moving the time up. Instead of being at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, it moved up to 7, 4. I think last year stores were opening at 12. It really just got out of control. It's like, what happened to Sacred Thanksgiving? That's, you know, we can go shopping at 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving night. I think they've stopped that this year. And, of course, besides Black Friday, we now have Cyber Monday. So the shopping has really gotten out of control. We do know that. Now, oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, what float has made an appearance in every single parade? Good old Santa Claus. We don't want to forget about Santa, do we now? So, what else can I tell you about Thanksgiving and these immigrants? In a way, I'm glad they had that harvest because I love to have my turkey, I love my sweet potatoes, and I love my pumpkin pie. So, let me finish by saying Thanksgiving is America's signature holiday. But we are not the only country that celebrates Thanksgiving. Canada actually celebrates Thanksgiving, and Canada celebrates Thanksgiving in October, believe it or not. So, just let me say this, guys. Before we celebrate into this day of feasting and counting our blessings, I want you guys to, before you sit down and watch football, before you start making your list for Black Friday, take the Thanksgiving Day quiz. It's fun. You'll enjoy it. Share it with your family and friends. Here's the deal. Since it is Thanksgiving, everybody gets 100% on the Thanksgiving quiz, no matter what you make. But remember, read the fine print. You must take the quiz to actually receive your 100%. If you do not take the Thanksgiving quiz, you will not get credit. So have fun with the quiz, Enjoy your holiday. Eat lots of turkey. Watch football if you like it. And, hey, make sure you beat the sales on Black Friday. I hope everyone has a happy and safe Thanksgiving. See you next week, guys. Bye-bye.